Hi, Rompereglas. Welcome to this episode of the Devotional Anarchy podcast. I I'm sitting in my kitchen with my tea on a beautiful Monday morning. It's Juneteenth, and as you might know, everything that I do in my business and in my life is spirit-led, is intuitively guided. And so for this episode that was coming up, I was sort of asking myself first, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? And I wasn't coming up with anything. I was been wanting to do an episode on the sacred whore, right? About healing the heart pelvic split. And it didn't quite feel like a full yes. So I consulted with spirit, and what started coming to me, and not necessarily related to Juneteenth, although it just really worked out that way that I'm recording this episode on Juneteenth, but is really about the bigger picture of how we hold the culture of whiteness in our bodies. Um, and I am offering this episode, I'm offering it from the perspective of a body worker, a practitioner slash psychologist slash therapist, a person who is into decolonization or uncolonization work, as someone who holds both whiteness and, you know, being a person of color at the same time. Um, and I want to sort of offer my unique perspective of it. And before I start, I just want to take you back, tell you a little story. In February of 2020, right before the pandemic, I taught a class to the institute where I got trained in somatics. It was just a 2-hour presentation on, how white practitioners could hold space for, clients of color, and how the embodiment of whiteness can get in the way of really connecting with the client's complaints or difficulties or struggles. And then the remainder of the weekend, I stayed the weekend. This presentation was on a Friday, and I stayed the weekend, and the rest of the weekend was taught by someone whose work focuses on embodied white supremacy. And I chose to be in that class, in that container for processing embodied white supremacy, because I recognize that a lot of people read me as white. I grew up with a white mother. I certainly have a ton of like European worldview that I grew up with. And what I realized in taking that class and people sharing their stories was that that was not a place for me to do my work, that particular work. And it was largely because I didn't grow up in the United States, and so I feel like my indoctrination into white supremacy culture as a child was through the filter of colonialism, and also, through the filter of having a white immigrant mom, living in a Caribbean island, and then having moved to the United States at age 18. So this is sort of how I am presenting this material from that perspective. So I just wanted to share that with you before even getting in there. So I'm doing this off script. Normally I have a lot more notes because I get ungrounded pretty easily when I'm presenting material, and my thoughts are often very roundabout, and that is a product of my Caribbean upbringing, is that I talk in circles and not linearly. And so in order to be able to present something in a linear fashion, I have to have notes. And so I don't have a lot of notes with me. So just know what you're getting into. So a lot of what I experienced in my own process of uncolonizing my body when I was working with a therapist, in my initial years at the institute of getting my training, was my sense of urgency. And a lot of what my practitioners, my therapists, my guides worked with me on was slowing the fuck down. Like I refused to slow down. And I was focused on talking a lot. I was focused on telling my story. And that has a lot to do with other things too, but want to bring it in as there's a sense of urgency that goes along with the embodiment of white supremacy, of like, even urgency around getting our needs met. I need to do this now, like, or responding to a situation. Like there's a resistance, generally speaking, in our culture of slowing the fuck down. And one thing that has been so precious to me in my personal evolution has been to slow down and feel more, because not only about slowing down is not only necessary to feel your feelings, but it's also necessary in order to feel the sensations in your body that inform what's happening on the inside. We're moving so quickly through our lives that we don't slow down enough to experience pleasure. We don't slow down enough to really see each other and connect, right? Intimately on a heart level. Um, we have quickie sex, which is fine once in a while, but like, have you really slowed down to really feel the parts of yourself that when you are engaged sexually with a person, like, are you really feeling all the sensations in your body? Are you feeling your vulnerability and your innocence, right? Like, so the invitation is for a deeper, bigger idea of slowing down, not just around, wanting to rescue someone out of their feelings or wanting to respond to, another police shooting or anything like that, but a more generalized sense of urgency that I notice with clients. And I often feel like an asshole in my sessions because I'm having to like, okay, like, let's use fewer words. Let's drop into your body. Tell me what you feel, right? Slow down, move slowly. And I mean, my I was very stubborn when there was a lot of resistance in me, because I was like, I didn't want to slow it down because I felt that I would be overwhelmed by what I was feeling. I would be overwhelmed by sensation, and I had to build a container for that sensation. So, you know, this is both an invitation to slow down and to recognize that, if you've had difficulty slowing down, yes, it's the embodiment of white supremacy. Yes, it is. It may be because you're a deep feeler, right? All of this stuff goes together, right? Doesn't all happen in a vacuum. So this piece around urgency goes along with the difficulty sitting with discomfort. And my work with clients is really about increasing their capacity to feel. Why? Because when we increase our capacity to feel, we increase our capacity to hold space for ourselves and to hold space for other people's discomfort. And discomfort is a huge part of the work of dismantling racism or dismantling white supremacist beliefs in the body, right? We have to feel the ways that we aren't in alignment, or we need to be able to hold space for the pain and rage of our ancestors or other people's pain and rage. And so increasing that capacity to feel our emotions, to feel sensations is an essential part. I see so many people, like I've witnessed so many discourses, let's say, even when I did my presentation in 2020 at the Institute. Part of the reason why I got so much pushback from the audience was that people did not want to be with their discomfort. People did not want to be or have a relationship with the possibility that they were privileged or that they were somehow colluding with white supremacy or benefiting in some way. And it's just like, yeah, that is fucking uncomfortable and I don't like it. And here's the reality that we live in, right? Like, let's not exist in illusion. Let's actually face what the fuck is happening and what we are participating in. And like, I still participate in white supremacy, and it's like, this is an imperfect process, which gets me to my next point around perfectionism. This is an imperfect process, and so it's like, it's really about going back and repairing or picking up or forgiving yourself or like just course correction. And I really want us to normalize that. So here's point number 3, perfectionism. So a lot of the ways that we embody white supremacy is through perfectionism, through wanting to get it right, through wanting to appear a certain way, to not be fallible, to not be susceptible or open to criticism and judgment from other people. And, in perfectionism, there is a desire to protect oneself from vulnerability. Perfectionism is a cloak for underlying shame, right? Because a lot of white supremacy is around like making you wrong, right? Makes us wrong. God, where do I even begin? Like it makes us wrong for being human, basically. And so the perfectionism is sort of an anti-human movement. It is, it's anti-humanness. So the antidote for perfection is vulnerability, is accepting your fallibility. It is the humility around like, I'm imperfect, I'm going to make mistakes, and even celebrating the fact that you're going to make mistakes. This is what we do in my community. We celebrate our humanity. Because I think that we need to normalize like this growth process. It's not always linear. We take steps back. We have shadow that arises, right? We act out. And the real work here is really about gentleness, forgiveness, and compassion when we do, right? Assuming that we will mess up. Like mess up is even, there's like a judgment around it, but really like that this is not a linear process, and that coming back into repair is the work. And the reason why I love repair work, whether it's in a one-on-one relationship, when I'm doing like counseling couples and their polyamory journeys, or in racial equity work, is because there is an opportunity for deeper intimacy, right? It's not about not messing up. It is about what happens when you do, right? Can we come into repair in a way that brings us closer together, right? Where we can see each other a little more clearly. Yeah, so there's a lot of vulnerability work that's required to heal the wound of perfectionism, or the cloak or the protection of perfectionism. Let me take a drink. So the next one I want to do, and I have 1, 2, 3 more to go over. No, yeah, 3 more to go over before we go into the basically the core of the earth, the heart of the matter, or the heart and the pelvic split of the matter. So the next point that I want to touch on is the all or nothing thinking. Witness this a lot in racial conversations, right? That we sort of like band into camps and are really unable to hold complexity around these issues. I see it a lot in vaccine decisions, whether or not to vaccinate. And if you vaccinate, you're a fucking collective hero all of a sudden just by getting jabbed. And then if you don't vaccinate, you're a Trumpist, you don't care about like just sort of that argument that really was so perpetuated by the media. And we just glommed onto that because it's like, oh, that's easy. Right? It's easy just to like sit down in a camp and be like, oh yeah, I'm right. I'm righteous in this. And right, like it lets us get into our shadow, where we can like feel righteous and good. And there's the shame piece again, right? We want to feel good because at some level we don't. at some unconscious level, we don't feel good, and we need to prop ourselves up into these camps in order to feel good about who we are and what we believe in. I believe the bigger work is around holding complexity, is around, like, can we hold the nuance? Like, you know, and I fully believe in setting boundaries. Like, if there are people in your life that you really can't have conversations with around these topics, and okay, well, then maybe they're not your people, right? And you need to set boundaries around them. But I have plenty of friends that we don't agree on everything. In fact, there are lots of ways that we don't agree and we diverge, and yet I can still be friends with them, and I can hold space for them, and I can hear their arguments and not feel like my belief system is being threatened. I just think differently or feel differently. And so I feel like, when we really are able to see each other again, the the work of intimacy is important and relevant here. When we can really see each other, really look into each other's eyes, for example, thinking about the body level, when we can look into each other's eyes and really see the complexity of the human being that's there. We can see this person in their wounding, but we can also see this person in their gifts. And we can see also their innocence and their purpose, perhaps, in life. I think that is the bigger work than, you know, um, than just kind of like putting yourself in a corner and being like, I believe this and you're wrong and I'm right. And that whole thing, it doesn't do any good. Another thing that I encounter a lot and really ends up being the focus of my work with a lot of people is what the authors in this article that I reference in the show notes is the quantity over quality. And the way I like that we measure success, let's say, through, like, quantitatively through how much money you make. But we don't really think about, like, when we think about abundance. Okay, this is a great example. When we think about abundance, when you think about, like, Abraham Hicks, manifesting abundance, the first thing people think about is money. Oh, how can I manifest more money? And that's, coaches who sell via, you can make this amount of money in this month, in this amount of month, if you follow my formula. Like, those people get the money of a lot of people and make lots of money, because when people think about manifestation and abundance, they think money. It's the first thing people think about. So there's like this quantitative way that we measure success and well-being is through financial, right? Financial measurements. But we don't often think about abundance as, wow, I have like really high quality relationships. I may not have a lot materially, but wow, emotionally and connectively, I have so much, right? So that's one way to think about the quantity over quality. The other way that I think about this piece, this facet of white supremacy, is around feeling, function over feeling. And the way that shows up is, when I talk about intimacy wounds and intimacy healing, it is like, when you grow up in an environment where there isn't that time to slow down, where there isn't that appreciation for pleasure and connection, when it really is about, hey, how good you do in school, or how well you did in the piano recital, or, how good a helper you are versus who you be, right? Who you are at the core of your being. A lot of the work that I do with clients is that, is around performance, right? People feeling like they have to perform, you know, perform anything, even perform in their business or perform in their relationships, having to play roles or, perform wokeness, even on in the minutia, like even performing compersion in polyamorous relationships, or even in session, performing a process to please me. And I was like, no, do it from, right, from the impulse that is arising in you. Don't just do the thing because it is what is being asked of you. Do it from with with access to your emotions, right? So it can come up in those little tiny moments in session, in a coaching session, where it's like, okay, no, let's slow down. What is actually happening on the inside? And the antidote to this function over feeling is to put feeling over function. And this is something that is incredibly difficult for a lot of people that I work with, or have worked with, to embody, trusting that what they feel on the inside, trusting that sensations can inform them as much or even more than a strategy that they've thought up, right? Or an idea, that they can trust their emotions and move in decision making, not just purely from an emotional place, right? Because that can be pretty chaotic, but to be guided by emotions, to be informed by emotions, and to trust their inner experience as much as they've learned to trust their mind, right? Because part of that white supremacy is the split between the head and the body. This is the function over feeling is so about, like, head focused living, thought focused, word focused, idea focused, concept focused. And concepts are wonderful. I love that shit. Okay. I really like nourish myself on concepts, and I often write conceptually. But really, can we get grounded? Can we drop into feeling? A lot of the work around white supremacy culture is around feeling more deeply, being able to connect on a heart level with other people, being able to listen with your heart to other people's stories and hold them in your heart and do the necessary grief work in order to be able to hold space for those stories, right? So the power of emotions is essential in dismantling white supremacy, really, um, uplifting, or highlighting, or putting in the upper tier of importance. Let's say that's we're thinking about a hierarchy. Oh God, here's another another thing to dismantle our hierarchies. But if we think about, the importance of emotions here, it's like that is a huge part of our humanity, of being able to feel each other, is to be able to really fucking feel each other. In order to feel someone, you have to be in your heart. So there's a lot that goes with that. There was something else I wanted to say about that. Yeah, just trusting the inner experiences. Yeah, and so the antidote to this is feeling over function, really trusting your emotions, really, going more with emotions, and processing emotions. This is why I teach emotional fluency and fluidity, is because of this quantity over quality concept. The way that we have split the head from the body, right? Like white supremacy culture is inherently disembodied. Okay. So the last of these facets, well, the second to last, because the last one is the big one. The second to last is the fear of conflict, the way that we mask aggression. And again, I see this a lot in, the culture of politeness, the way that we don't really address the elephant in the room, because we don't want to upset the apple cart, as they say. We don't want to, really, we're afraid of confrontation. Um, we're afraid to name the thing. We're afraid to tell the truth. because white supremacy is a culture of obscuring, hiding, and lying. It's about denial as much as colonialism is about self-denial as well, and self-betrayal. And so, a lot of what we encounter when we encounter another person who maybe isn't far along in their work is that we often confront mask. We often confront masks, like social masks of serenity, which means, like somebody who is like, who talks the talk around spirituality, but doesn't walk it, who practices spirituality in a disembodied way, doesn't really live it out in their personal relationships or in their business. We also have masks of power, right? Where people appear powerful, but it really is about not being vulnerable. It is about, hiding vulnerability and using power and control and manipulation in very subtle ways here to get needs met, or to deal with conflict. And then there's also the mask of love, right? The way that we appease and the way that we give in order to get, right? We give love in order to get love, or we appease because we're afraid of conflict, right? We're in a fawn response, for example. And for me, my perspective here is that the antidote to this fear of conflict that is a facet of white supremacy culture is in really bringing conflict to the surface, not from a place of like, all right, let's get in a fight, but to name what's here, to call in the shadow, right? Which is what we've been witnessing collectively, over the past couple of years, where past couple of years, more, maybe the last 4 or 5 years, really seen the collective shadow come up around like what is really brewing under the surface. So my question is, what if we actually name the thing that's here, right? For example, if I am feeling angry with somebody, instead of like hiding it or putting it to the side or trying to manage it internally, why don't I just say, I am feeling incredibly angry right now? And to do it from a place of self-ownership, right? I'm not acting out my anger. I am naming it and bringing it into the space, and I am holding it. I have a container for it within myself, and I can bring it into the conversation without making it about the other person, right? And without like externalizing it energetically and having it get tangled up in somebody else's. It's like, no, I'm feeling really angry right now. I'm feeling hurt, and that is contributing to feelings of anger. Or, I know that when I feel rejected, it's not that necessarily rejection is actually happening, but when I feel rejected, my response is anger. My immediate, like, it just fires up anger. And so when I feel angry, it is a time for me to pause, and I can bring it into the conversation. It's like, I know that you're not rejecting me, but I'm feeling it on some level, I'm feeling rejected. And I'm going to get curious about that. I feel like you don't trust me. And when I don't feel trusted, it hurts because I want to be in relationship with you. I want you to be with me, and I don't feel you with me. And that makes me, that sparks anger in me, right? To do that, to say that, and to have it be, using language of ownership, using accountability and radical self-ownership in your relationships. Like, how amazing is that if we could own our experiences and own our shadow and say like, yeah, there's a part of me that wants to fucking kill you right now, and not having to yell it, but to be like, yeah, I really like, I'm having an intense reaction right now, and to be able to sit with it and be with it while also staying in relationship with the person. So doesn't always happen because we're human, ta-da. And so, yeah, coming back to gentleness and repair and all the stuff that I talked about earlier. So I'm coming up on time. I don't want to make this too long. because I know people's attention is limited. But a big piece that I feel is absolutely necessary to talk about here is the heart pelvic split. I talked earlier about the separation between head and body. And the other piece here is about the separation between heart and pelvis. And I want you to think of this like when you touch sort of underneath your ribs, right around your diaphragm, a lot of people have sort of the separation, like almost like an energetic block, let's call it, like an energetic separation between, artificial separation between love and sex, right? It's been systematically separated, mostly through religious conditioning, and it's created this harmful disconnection in the body. And it's partly because we've made sexuality dirty and wrong when it is so innocent and natural and good, right? And in order to fall into step and belong in the world, you had to separate from your sexuality. This is what I experience a lot of people. There's like pelvic shame. And I'm not talking about sort of in the literal sense, but it's just how we hold corrupt concepts in the body. And I didn't even know that I was holding an incredible amount of shame around my own sexuality until I started to really engage my sexuality in ways that felt good to me. And it was like, it was just like, it just, as I inputted what felt good and right to me, it was like my body just exported and like dumped out all of this shame. And it was incredible, all that was in there. And I know that a lot of it, didn't start with me. A lot of it was ancestral. And so I held space for that all to filter out of my system. So yes, so the disconnection between heart and pelvis is generations deep. I mean, it's possible that it's centuries deep, right? So deep that you can't feel it in your body because it's always been there, right? Because generational stuff, we just come in with it karmically and it feels normal to you. And yet, sometimes when we can sense things, when we trust what we feel, when you slow down and access sensation or invite sensation, maybe you can sense a disconnection. Maybe you're aware that something is missing, and it comes up in different ways. It can come up as dis-ease. Maybe you have a sense that there's something bigger out there for you, even though you don't know exactly what it is, right? Maybe you feel disconnected from your sexuality altogether, as I was many years ago, or you feel disconnected from your heart. Maybe it shows up in your relationships that you have a lot of sexual relationships, but you don't feel the heart connection, or otherwise, maybe you feel heart connected with your partner, or partners, and that there's no sexuality there, right? Most people I've worked with, a lot of people I've worked with, and a lot of the work I've done with myself is around the rooting in our pelvises, really rooting in our sexuality, transmuting shadow, working with shame, not only sexual shame, but the shame of humanness, right? My work is about humanizing and humanizing yourself in your relationships, in your business, all of it, in your leadership. And when we do deep pelvic work, it connects us to more safety, right? To trust, I talked in an earlier episode about the importance of feeling safe in your own body, trusting your experiences, trusting your inner wisdom. And so this is really about walking the path, for me, walking the path of the sacred whore or the sacred prostitute. This is an archetype, the merging again of love and sexuality. And this is when we experience the split between heart and pelvis. Yes, it is personal. If you've experienced sexual abuse, that'll certainly happen there. If you experience betrayal, right? All of these intimacy wounds contribute to heart pelvic splits. And then there's also the collective / generational piece. So part of I want to remind you that the word prostitute comes from the Greek word prostrate, which means to bow before the altar, to bow before the statue. The way that I understand that is to bow before the altar being your own humanness and your own body, really recognizing the body and everything and its contents, let's say, as sacred. So, the sacred prostitute archetype is related to ancient goddesses of love, such as Aphrodite, Ishtar, and Isis. And as as an archetype of Shakti, also the sacred prostitutes correlates to the energy of receiving, right? Which is to give the whole body completely to the devotion of another, right? This can be in relationship or even in service work, to give yourself in devotion, but it doesn't come at the cost of your devotion to self, right? So there is a balance between like you giving your full self, right? Your sexual energy, your heart energy, your body, your spirit to another, to a service, but also nourishing those places within yourself. It could mean sexual surrender, right? Um, that this archetype shows us how to care for, love, and nurture another life form with our own bodies, right? As a mother does with a child. And this is what Mother Nature does for us as well. She provides unconditional love through the food and natural resources she provides, right? So our bodies are inherently devotional. They are capable of devotion. This is the work of intimacy healing, right? And so the practices of like healing white supremacy, and particularly thinking about now the path of the sacred whore, healing the heart pelvic split, is really for me about doing grief work and shame work, right? Practicing devotion, right? When we talk about practicing devotion, I practice asking myself what I need and responding to my needs, about being responsive to what is happening in my body, to be in reverence, and to be in dedication to emotional processing, to be dedicated to dismantling harmful belief systems that show up for me, that say, that judge or that criticize or that tell me that I'm wrong or some way, that I'm not worthy, or that I am too much or not enough in some way, right? All of those ways that collective trauma comes into our thought space, into our embodied belief systems. So the devotional work that I talked about in an earlier episode of season 2 is of responding to needs, responding to, when you need to rest, when your body wants to play, when you want to even biological, when you need to go to the bathroom, or when you need to eat, but also like responding to emotional needs, responding to spiritual needs, responding to, energetic nourishment, like what fills you up, filling up, and not moving from a place of deficiency or lack or emptiness, right? The archetype of the sacred whore gives us the power to fully care for ourselves, to fully love ourselves, to fully devote ourselves to the divine, because the divine lives within us, right? That's part of what we are taught in religious programming, is that the divine lives outside of us. Connection is out there in relationships. No, connection, self-connection, it happens right here. It begins right here with you in your own body. And also the path of the sacred whore is about like devotion, the full material expression of our divine purpose and fulfillment, which means like really changing our relationship with money, really thinking about money as energy, as a resource. Just as love is something that can be circulated, money is also something that can be circulated. It's a creative expression, or it can be used creatively. So I just want to say one last thing before I end today. I want to say something about the importance of grief work and shame work. Um, when I talk about the dismantling white supremacy in the body, there is primarily, right, the head split from the body, which is about honoring sensations, emotions, but then the heart pelvic split, which is on the heart level around doing the grief work. When you're feeling your feelings and when you're honoring your emotions, you attend to them. You hold space for them. You give them room to be expressed, whether you do it in a 5 minute, put some music on Spotify and let yourself like swamp it out, like really get into it and move it through your body, compost it, or journal about it, right? Really dedicating that time to the grief work, because the grief work that you're doing is not just about you, it is ancestral. We are, there is so many wrongs, so many I don't want to use the word wrongs, but there are so many um just really awful ways that we've dehumanized each other, that we need to grieve from an ancestral collective place. And then again, with the pelvis, with our sexuality, really freeing up and owning our shadow, really owning our rage, um, allowing our anger to move in containers that are safe and protected. And it's really not about letting it out on another person, but about really owning it for yourself and really recognizing the power that lives there and how it's connected to creativity. Like the heart pelvic split for me was about accessing not only my sexuality, but a tremendous creativity and an expansive model of love that I hope is the essence, that I believe is the essence of the Devotional Anarchy podcast. It's really about, my work is really about just loving fully, like releasing or unleashing love in the world in a way that is grounded, practical, not just about a concept, but about an like love in action, right? In every moment, whether it's towards yourself, towards another, right? Towards the earth, any sort of relationship. So that's where I want to end today. Um, thank you for listening all the way through. Sending you so much love today. And yeah, I'll see you in the next episode. All right. Bye-bye.